There we go. All right, thank you everybody for your patience. Today I'm going to talk about 10 ways you can get creative with Lightning components. These are some pretty interesting add-ons you can use in flow screens and also on Lightning record pages. A little bit about myself. My name is Eric Smith. I work as a technical architect for a Salesforce consulting partner, Gears CRM. I've been involved in technology for a few decades now. I won't say how long, but it's been a while. But what I'm going to talk about today are some components, either ones that I've created or that I've modified or updated. They're all available for free online on unofficialsf.com. Doesn't require any coding. You can customize these to do a lot of different things for you. There's page components, there's flow actions, flow screen components, quite a few things to choose from. But I'm going to touch on 10 of these today and show how you might be able to put them to use in your own orgs. The first one is a pretty simple component, and what it does is it draws a line. And you ask, why would you want a component to draw a line? Well, it can really help to break up a page or change how you present information on a page. Without a line here, these three buttons kind of look grouped together, really hard to tell them apart. But if I put a line between them, we can see that that update button is really associated with the text box above it, and the reset and the loss buttons are separate and on the bottom of the page. So just by having a line, it gives you a little cleaner appearance on the screen. Look at an example here. This is 4 different data tables. If I don't have any lines between them, the information on the screen is all jumbled together, kind of hard to read. But by adding some lines and some color in between them, you can really clean up how your page looks, make it easier for the user to get the information they need and interact with that page. Another component I wanted to talk about is this is designed for a Lightning record page, and it's a component I created to display large text area fields. Screen real estate is pretty important, especially in Lightning, and I wanted to give the users the ability to see these large text fields when they needed to, but to also give them the ability to turn them off when they don't need to see them. So this component allows you to display a large text area field. The user can interact with that text box. They can resize it themselves. They can click the toggle button to turn it on or turn it off. So they only are looking at it when they need to see it. When they turn it off, the rest of the information on the screen becomes much more available to them. I also have a setting or an attribute on this component. You can display this field in view-only mode, or you can also display it in edit mode. And when we're displaying it in edit mode, the user can make changes to the field, and then there's an update button that they can click on to write those changes back to the record. So it's a pretty powerful component, a number of different ways you can use it. All depends upon how you configure it on your own record page. One of the items that we saw in conjunction with that particular component was a toggle button. I've created a separate component for Lightning record pages to allow you to toggle the value of a checkbox field by clicking on a toggle button. So here I have my component with a toggle button to allow a service technician to escalate a case. And you see the field is escalated on the record. When I click the toggle button, it goes out and immediately updates the field on the record, and we can see on the screen that the field has changed. Another interesting thing about being able to use a button to update a field is you can use a record-triggered flow or a process builder to run when the value of this particular field changes. So you're really giving the user the ability to click a button or click a toggle on the screen and actually run a flow or run a process builder by doing so. In this particular example, if the technician clicks the case is escalated, it not only updates that field, it runs a record-triggered flow that sends a notification to a manager saying, hey, this particular case has been escalated, and they get to see that notification on their screen. So there's a lot of power and capability just in the simple component that allows you to just update a checkbox field. Another interesting use for this has to do with conditional visibility. Here I'm just updating a couple different checkbox fields on my record, but I'm using those fields to conditionally display one component or another component. And by clicking these buttons or changing these toggles, I can turn these components on and off on the screen because the values, the records are being changed, which affects the conditional visibility of whether we're going to show these individual components. Just showing here how that's done is you just set a component visibility based on the value of a field. So when the toggle button changes the field, the visibility changes on the component. Another interesting visual component that you could use this time on flow screens is what's called a visual pick list. And this allows you to not just display pick list values, but to include images or icons with them as well. So here we got that same case record we're looking at, and we're giving the technician the ability to update a field that says, how is the customer feeling? Are they happy? Are they angry? Is it neutral? And we're presenting those pick list options with an image to go along with it as well. So this is just a different way of presenting a pick list to your users. This case, we're looking at an image with text next to it. You could also just do an image by itself if you wanted to, and just click on a picture to make a change in your records. A common need that people have when they're creating flows is they want to have the ability sometimes to tell the flow to navigate or go to a new record. And this is an action that allows you to pass in a record ID and then tell the flow to go and open that particular record. In this case, you could do it in either view mode, which takes you to the record, or you could say, I want to do this in edit mode, and it'll pop up a modal on the screen with allowing the user to edit and change any of the fields in the record. So the example that we're seeing here is one where in a case we're creating an asset record, and once that asset record is created, we want to be able to take the user to it to either do more information with it, view it, edit it, whatever they need to do. So this is a very helpful component to put at the end of the flow if you want to redirect to a new record or somewhere else in Salesforce when you're done running your flow. I have another pick list component that's very useful in a lot of different areas, and this allows you to do a pick list and display the pick list as radio buttons, as checkboxes, as text, as images on what I call a visual card. And the nice thing about this pick list component is it will honor the record type. So you can pass in a record type ID, and the pick list will only show the options for that pick list that are set up for that particular record type. You know, here, for example, in an opportunity, if it's one record type, I have one set of options. If it's a different record type, we see that we have a completely different set of pick list options. So that's all something that you set up in your configuration. But in the past, if you wanted to use pick lists in a flow, the standard pick list component would always display all pick list field values, no matter what the record type was, which really isn't a good user experience. So here's an example of just doing radio buttons. Here are the visual cards. You can use these on a pick list. It's a nice, clean way of presenting a limited amount of information. You could do these in one column. You could do them in two columns. You can add images to them. So it's a fairly powerful component that you can bring into your flows and use in a number of different ways. Probably the most widely used component out there that I've created is a component I wrote to display a data table. It's kind of like a list view on a flow screen. I think right now, I think since the first of the year, this has been installed on over 7,000 active orgs out there. So it's seen a lot of use, a lot of very interesting use cases. And I'll step through why I created it originally. Now here's some data tables I'm displaying on a screen. But the reason I did this is originally in flows, I was using dynamic record choice. And this is what my flows would look like when I wanted to present to the user a list of records and have them pick one of them. And the reason it looks so jumbled and hard to read is the dynamic record choice only allows you to display a single field. So what I would do is I would go and create a formula field which took the values from a bunch of other fields and kind of pulled them all together so I could display more information on the screen for the user to make a selection. And after doing this a number of times, I said, there's really got to be a better way to display that data and format that data. And that's why I came up with the data table component. So we go from that jumbled, hard to read look to individual tables. You can do things like multi-select, you can single select, and while they're being displayed, the user has control over how they're looking at that table. They can change widths of columns, they can turn on text wrapping, turn it off, they can sort columns, they can do filters, they can edit fields. There's a lot of different capabilities built into this single data table component. So there's a lot of different ways you could put this to use. To help you with that, I've written a number of blog posts and articles on how to use it, how to take advantage of it, different use cases. So there's a lot of supporting material and documentation to help you out with this particular component and find some interesting ways to put it to use in your flows. Another fun component for flows is a navigation button. Now, in the upcoming winter release, you finally are going to have the ability to change what's on the next and the previous and pause button labels. But we had never had that before, and that was the primary reason for having a component or an action that allows you to navigate in a flow, because you can display your own buttons. They can look different than the regular next and previous buttons. You can put your own text on them, and you can have them do a number of different things, whether they're just going to navigate in the flow, whether they're going to go to a URL or go to a record ID. These buttons can really be put to use in a number of different ways. Now, this particular example here, I have a cancel button and I have a reset button, but they both do the same thing. They both just tell the flow to go to the next item in the flow. The exact same thing, but in our flow, if we have those buttons on a screen, after the screen we can have a decision to say which button did they press, and based on which button they press, you can then go and follow a different path in your flow and perform different actions. In this case, cancel does one thing, refresh does a whole other series of things in the flow, and we're just controlling that by just going to the next item after the screen, but then checking what button was selected. You can also add some dynamic capability in the labels and the visibility of the buttons as well. This is just a little flow I wrote to allow somebody to update contact roles. And I just have one navigation button component in that flow, but as you can see, depending upon what might be selected, it's displaying different labels, different buttons, different colors, and it's all controlled by other values in the flow. So you really do have some good power and capability as to what you're displaying for buttons and how you're interacting with them. Quick Lookup is also a pretty powerful component, and this came about originally because wanted the ability to tie in multiple lookups together on a single screen. In the past, if you were doing something like you wanted to look up an account and then you wanted to look up a contact, but only look up a contact that's on that account that you previously selected, you had to do two separate screens in your flow. One to ask for the account, you save your value, then you go to the next screen and you apply the filter for the contact lookup. And it really wasn't a good user experience. So I wanted to be able to have this all on a single screen. So this lookup component, they basically, when you have multiple lookup components on the same screen, they communicate with each other. So you pass these filter values back and forth in a kind of in a parent-child-grandchild relationship. So in this example here, if you see a selection for account, you'll see there's certain contacts that are available depending upon what account was selected. You see if they change that account value, they'll then have different contacts presented to them in the next lookup field. So we've looked at some pretty complicated, or not complicated, but complex and powerful components, and some simple ones as well. The first one we looked at was a component that drew a line. And I'm going to finish this up with a component that displays a picture or an image. But there's some interesting things we can do with this image component. We can't just display a picture, we can make it be a button. So the flow can act on it if the user clicks on it. But in addition to being able to interact with that image as a button, we can also interact with the image just by hovering the mouse over it. So you could have one image displayed by default. You could have another image displayed when the mouse is hovering over it. And you could even have a third image displayed when they click on that. So you could, in this example, you can kind of give a 3D effect to a button on a flow screen. So this is pretty powerful. There's a lot of different ways you can use this type of component. I'll show you one other way I used it. I just displayed a GIF file image. This was a case where I had recently converted an org from Classic to Lightning. And I found the users kept going back to Classic to do certain things, and I didn't want them to keep doing that. So I updated a flow that if they ran it in Classic, it would display an image that they wouldn't see if they were running it in Lightning. And this image basically says, no, you can't keep doing this in Classic. You got to switch back to Lightning to do what you want to do. So this is just another way of interacting with the users and saying, you really should be learning Lightning and starting to do these type of flows and other things in Lightning. So this was just taking advantage of that image button and displaying an image when they did that. So I've gone through fairly quickly, but there were 10 different components. You can download all of these from unofficialsf.com. The links are here in the presentation. The instructions and examples on how to use these are part of those links. So you get the instructions and you get the code and the download links and everything else when you go and visit them on this site. So 10 different components you could take advantage of. Hopefully you've seen some of these and thought of some things right now that you might be able to do in your own org by taking advantage of some of these. Just one final bonus tip. A lot of these relied on conditional visibility or took advantage of conditional visibility to display different things and do different things depending upon how the component was interacting with the user. So if you're not using conditional visibility currently, I suggest looking into it, taking advantage of it. It's pretty powerful, not just in Lightning Flow screens, but on Lightning record pages as well. So I hope you've learned something and come up with some ideas. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I hope you enjoyed what you saw today.
Thank you for the great session, Eric. I'm sure it would save a lot of time for anybody who would be using these components and also
Oh, I hope
provide
so.
great functionality right out of the box without having to create it. So for me, it was really insightful, and I'm excited to try these out. For
Great.
sure for myself. Okay. So are there any questions? Let me check. No questions so far. Um, let's wait for a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat section here or in the question answer sessions section. Sorry.
And I would assume you're making the slides or the presentation available for folks so they can go and directly to those links and download the components for themselves.
Yeah, sure. So we will be making the recordings available as well and the presentations as well on the speaker's discretion. So if they
Great.
would like to share, we can share them with the attendees today.
Wonderful.
So no questions so far, Eric. So I think we're then good to go ahead and run the raffle
Okay.
for our tradition of ending every session today. Before I do that, I would like to again appreciate your time, especially on the weekend. We really appreciate having you today with us.
You bet. Glad to do it.